My lords, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invite to come and speak to you all this evening. I was actually asked at lunchtime today, UK Drones Lead, how did you come by that title? And I realised the FT did an article on the development of a drones team within PwC in January of last year, and they entitled me the UK Drones Lead. And I thought, that'll do, that'll stick, and I've just kept it ever since. So it's a little bit by accident, but nonetheless, that is my role within PwC. And I often get challenged, why do PwC care about drones? And it's just a different way to collect data. And we are a company that works on data, traditionally financial data, which is why collecting aerial data is disrupting the way that we do our business and the way our clients are doing their business. So I'm going to share with you this evening in my short introduction perhaps what the opportunity could be for UK PLC from the drone economy. I'm then going to talk you through some of the use cases of the here and now and perhaps a little bit of horizon scanning of what the future could hold. So if we take the opportunity, we undertook an economic study in May of last year, and from that study we predicted that for the UK economy by 2030 drones could be worth as much as 42 billion. 42 billion, that's nearly 2% of GDP. That's a substantial amount of money. But we also said that in order to achieve that, there are three key areas that need to develop. We need to see an expansion of regulation, we need to see advancement of technology, but most importantly, we also need to see societal acceptance. And I think as we talk about all emerging technology and how we're going to use it for the greater good and for the benefits of society, that societal acceptance is a real key factor that often gets overlooked. Now, we do have the benefit in drones that we have a regulator, the regulator being the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, and that in itself helps to create some of that trust that we so need to be able to develop this technology and really have it used ubiquitously across commercial sectors so that we can deliver the 42 billion economy that it could become. So let me look at some of the use cases that we see at this moment in time. There's a spectrum of drones. You've actually heard in the introduction there that we're talking about drones that fly in the air. If you were in defence, you'd call that an unmanned aerial vehicle. Drones is almost a swear word. It's definitely a slang word that they would prefer not to use, but it is creeping more and more into their lexicon. But an unmanned aerial vehicle. It has just taken a sensor of some description into a higher position than the eye can reach. And that sensor is collecting data. It could be thermal imagery data, it could be photography style data, lots of different other sensors that could be used. And it's collecting that data and then it needs to be used and sent back. And that system of sending it back and having a ground station of some description where you can look at the data and interpret it brings it into an unmanned aerial system. So the vehicle is what flies, the system is what connects the whole picture together, and we call it drones, or I will call it drones for the purpose of the rest of this session here. So when we look at a spectrum of what could drones deliver for us, today the most mature industry, I would suggest, is the filming industry. And I think of the Blue Planet series of 2 years ago, where we all got to see those creatures living in their environment up close. And we got to see that because the film crew who was sitting and waiting for months, literally months, to capture that precious moment, had a drone. And when the creatures came in, I think it was in a bay, I can't remember what they are now, but when they came in, they deployed this drone and got up close images, and we, the viewers at home, sat and learned and saw a different insight that we hadn't seen before. And that, in its most simplest form, is the benefit of drones as it stands today. They are giving us a different insight to something in the environment. And they're doing that because they are quicker, cheaper, and more accurate than existing methods. And so filming is here and now. We're also seeing drones being used more and more in surveying and also in inspection work. But the spectrum is very wide, and if you were to take a look and say, well, what would be the extreme far right of a spectrum of an unmanned aerial vehicle, then it would be that ambition for a taxi service where you can just be hopping from one urban city environment to another. We're a long way off that. What's perhaps a little closer to home is drones being used as a delivery mechanism. And when I did give evidence at the Science and Technology Committee recently, I was on the panel with Amazon, and they predicted within 5 years that would be feasible. Now, we undertook a trust survey earlier on this year to try and glean what would be, based on this societal acceptance theme, how much are people really ready to see drones flying around? And we have it touched upon in the introduction there. Because they are quite noisy, and there is a sense of intrusion when you see them. And what we found is, when it comes to a risk-to-life scenario, so a search and rescue type incident, people are more than willing to see drones being used. 80+% of people are happy, and we can all see that. And it's not surprising, therefore, that we're seeing an increased uptake of this technology within our public services, in particular our police and fire crews using them, and search and rescue in that use case. What we're not so ready as a society to accept is seeing them being used for package delivery. But if you were to combine the two, if it was to be package delivery of a medicine to someone who is unable to reach the location to get their medicine, then you can see how it's beginning to become that technology for good that we want to be able to see and use as a society and deliver the benefits for many others, many of the, particularly on delivery, for many people who would struggle to be able to go and access the right areas to be able to get there, whether it be medicine or whatever personal goods it may be. We're also seeing increased trials of being able to carry from a commercial to commercial environment, being able to trial transporting of goods. So there was, last year at Manchester Airport, they conducted a very difficult experiment of a controlled airspace using drones for multiple use cases. And one of those was transporting a part from one side of the airfield over to the other side of the airfield. Sounds fairly straightforward, but you need to have the right control in place to allow that to happen safely. That could knock off an hour of travelling with that part all the way around the airfield, and would all benefit from the save of time of a delayed aircraft in that kind of environment. So you can see on that commercial use, just transporting parts around is really beneficial in terms of delays. Network Rail, I often use that as an example, where they use, I think they've got 12 or 13 trains that they use to go out and collect data on their tracks to inspect it and understand predict where the next faults are going to be. They've also got one manned helicopter that does the same. I could foresee a future, and it's not here yet, but a future where a whole swarm of drones can go out and collect that data and prevent the delays. And hopefully they will prioritise the Paddington to Bristol line. I would be forever grateful if they did that. Yeah. Few of us use GWR. So we can see in surveying and inspection the benefits. And we would, as a society, accept Network Rail using drones because actually they're in a fairly controlled, benign environment. Oil and gas platforms using drones because, again, we don't really see that. We're not hearing the noise. We've not got a sense that it's going to irritate us from a privacy perspective. But when it comes to delivery, I think there's a lot that needs to change to allow that to happen from a societal acceptance. But I said there was 3 things that need to change: regulation, technology, and societal acceptance. So if I look at the regulation, which may be something people want to touch on in questions, at this moment in time, you have to be able to have one operator who can physically see where the drone's flying, so within visual line of sight. For it to fly beyond visual line of sight, and the CAA will grant you a special authority to be able to do that if you have the right safety case. What's really important here is the CAA is there to protect the safety of airspace, to protect our safety. And my background as a safety and airworthiness engineer, that's absolute forefront of how we should be developing and taking this technology forward. So to fly beyond visual line of sight, you can get special permission, but it's only on unique cases. We really want to see this technology being used more widespread. And what we really need is some form of traffic management in that lower airspace. And that's when it gets complicated, where you need standards and the regulation to change and the systems to support it, and it becomes much more complicated. So to reach the 2030 42 billion ambition, and within that report we also predicted 16 billion of productivity savings, and I hope from some of those examples you can see how much time and energy and safety is given through using a drone technology rather than using traditional inspection methodologies. Then we need to see the growth and expansion of regulation. So where would I finish up just doing this introductory piece? If you want to successfully apply a drone technology into a particular sector, I think you need to come from that sector first. The drone is a tool that you use within that sector. So where I see it being used most effectively by companies in the surveying context is they were surveyors first, and then they picked this thing up because of drone and they use as a tool. In inspection, exactly the same. They were oil and gas inspectors first, hanging from ropes, putting themselves in danger, and they thought, wouldn't it be easier if we used a drone to do this so we could protect ourselves, capture better quality of data, and capture it quicker? So I would say, whilst we're seeing drones being used and more startups in this area, the real successes comes from those who have deep sector knowledge and use drone as a tool in addition to all the other methods that they use within their day-to-day business. I think that's probably enough from me. I'm getting thumbs up, you've talked enough. And I will step down and allow my other panellists to come and speak. Thank you.